Hello everybody, welcome to the book log. Today I'm logging Beloved by Toni Morrison. Beloved is a beautiful book. It feels kind of strange to put it that way given how much of the story is so harrowing and sad and brutal and horrifying, but there's simply no way around it. In spite of its weight and its darkness, it is just an incredibly beautiful story. Even before getting into the actual narrative and the themes and whatnot, just on a prose level, some of the prettiest writing I've ever read. So many amazing turns of phrase, lovely passages. Toni Morrison just has such an elegant mastery of the English language. Every day reading this book, I would be struck by at least one paragraph or page or phrase that just really floored me in some way or another. But that's just the very surface of why this book is special. It's kind of difficult to talk about what happens in this book because it's constructed in a very layered and complex way. There is a present tense storyline at the core, but the narrative constantly alternates between different timelines and different perspectives. The idea of memory is a very important component to the story, and a lot of the central events to the book actually take place in the past and are played out through the characters' recollections of what happened. Sometimes scenes are in one character's memory inside another character's memory. Sometimes the same event is recounted at a later point, but from a different character's perspective. Sometimes these changes in the time and place of the story happen very abruptly, like mid-paragraph, which really forces you to pay attention to who is thinking what and why. That all probably makes this sound more confusing than it is. Toni Morrison's writing is so strong that in spite of all that complexity, these shifts feel really smooth and effortless. Due to its non-chronological nature, it's a bit tricky to unwrap the plot of this story for review purposes, so I'm just going to start as what I see as the central event of the novel. A woman named Sethe killing her baby daughter, Beloved. This is the central event both in the sense that it's the most important event and a lot of the themes and ideas of the book revolve around it, but it is also literally the center of the story chronologically. Both the things leading up to this event as well as its aftermath are thoroughly detailed before the event itself is ever shown in the text. The book is structured almost like a spiral in this way, kind of coloring the periphery before it gets to the center. The book opens with Sethe living with her other daughter, Denver, years later in a house called 124 or 124. The house is inhabited only by them and the ghost of Beloved. Sethe's two sons, Howard and Bugler, ran away due to the ghost's antics, and Sethe's mother-in-law, Baby Suggs, died shortly after that. One day, Paul D shows up, a former slave like Sethe who lived with her at a plantation called Sweet Home. Initially, it seems that his presence has driven the ghost away from the house, but just days after he arrives, a mysterious woman dressed in black emerges from the river behind 124, claiming to be Beloved in the flesh. Paul D's arrival not only brings back a physical manifestation of the trauma of Sethe's past, but through his character, Toni Morrison really explores this idea of memory and the ways that the trauma of the past can resurface psychologically, not only through Paul D's own memories of his time enslaved at Sweet Home and the awful things he experienced there, as well as his memories of the horrific conditions he endured afterwards as a prisoner in Georgia. But his presence forces Sethe to reconfront her own traumatic past, including the death of her daughter, which she has been trying very hard for a very long time to deliberately repress and forget. Like I mentioned, chronological time doesn't really function normally in this book. Even though characters are having these memories and are reflecting on their past experiences, the book treats them as though they are present events. The narrative will switch to a first-person recounting of an event in the past as though it's happening in the present. A character will be doing one thing, have some memory, and then that memory will play out as a present tense narration. This is interesting and fun just in a structural kind of way, but it also plays very nicely into the themes of the book as well, trying to beat back the past, to not let those events manifest in present day life. Is this idea that time is like a traversable space. The terrible traumas of the past are still present, and the book treats them that way. At its core, this is a book about slavery and the immense psychological toll it takes on its victims, how insurmountable that toll feels. And so through Sethe, it poses an incredibly harrowing question. Is it okay to kill your child to protect them from those atrocities? Is that a justified course of action? When getting captured is very arguably a fate worse than death, how are you supposed to judge something like that? A recurring motif throughout this book is about how when you're enslaved, it's dangerous to love anything because you don't own anything. You don't even own your own children. If anything and everything can and will be taken away from you at any moment, maybe killing your own child can even be rationalized as a form of taking back control. That's what it can reduce you to as a human being. The reason I call this book beautiful in the beginning of this review is that in spite of how dismal a lot of its contents are and how dark the questions it poses are, Toni Morrison's characters display a beautiful amount of resilience and humanity. Through physical and psychological brutalization, through slavery, they continue forward in the face of any and all attempts to dehumanize them or to define them as non-human, as it is often put. There's some degree of whiplash reading about all this terrifying trauma scattered within and throughout some of the most lovely prose ever conjured up. But that in itself is an incredible feat. Just beautiful, haunting, unforgettable. Not sure I've ever read a book quite as affecting as this. Easy 10 out of 10.